guys, welcome back to today's podcast episode. And today I am joined by an incredibly inspiring female founder, Rhian Stephenson. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, good.
You got it.
Rhian or Rhian? Rhian Stephenson. And Rhian is the founder of Arta, which is an incredible health and supplement and well-being company, one that I love myself. And I'm so excited to get into today's episode. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I know, I'm so excited. I feel like already, as soon as you walked in, you have the best energy and aura. And also you just seem to have this real balanced and realistic approach to wellness. So I'm really
I hope so.
looking forward to it, to getting into this.
Good.
So please, can you tell me kind of how you got into this? Because I always think when there's a founder in the health space, it comes from a personal struggle or story or reason where you're trying to solve that. So can we start there?
Sure. So as a child, I was incredibly sickly. So I spent my whole childhood going around to see doctors, to see specialists, and nobody could ever figure out what was wrong. And it was really abnormal. You know, I had to sleep propped up because I had heartburn. This is age 10. I had chronic sinus infections, chest infections. I had, terrible stomach pains, and nobody could actually figure out what was wrong. I was fatigued. I had migraines. And my mom took me to, I think at least 10 doctors. I had every single test, and everyone was like, you're fine, right? Because there was nothing medically wrong. So I kind of went through the rest of my teens just being very unwell. I carried Pepto-Bismol in my backpack and Tums. It was really crazy. Terrible. Yeah. And
at age 10 as well.
Yeah. I mean, it was just horrible. And so basically when I was about 17 or 18, my mom took me to a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor. And we actually found out that I was allergic to the protein in cow's milk. So I'd been tested for lactose intolerance because that's kind of what they tested back then. But cow protein allergy, firstly, it's quite rare in older kids. So it was just never even considered. So I changed my diet and I worked with them to use supplementation and food to kind of regain my health, and my entire life just transformed. And I was so inspired by that's kind of what's led me into the wellness space.
That's crazy. Yeah. So how many years were you dealing with not knowing and misdiagnosis?
My whole childhood.
That's so, and imagine for your parents, it must have been so frustrating. They're trying to help you and you just had no idea where this was coming from.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard as a parent because you've got all these doctors saying she's totally fine. So you're kind of going back and forth between is she just being a drama queen? Yeah. Does she not like school? They eventually referred me to a psychiatrist, and they were like, maybe she doesn't like school. And I was like, I love school. I was quite a nerd. And so it's really frustrating because I think they always, of course, wanted to be on my side, but after years and years and years, you're a bit like, what's going on here?
What could this be? Maybe it is a mental health issue or something.
And I remember one of the doctors told my mom, I think she just has a weak constitution. And my mom was like a superstar athlete and a really tough woman. And she was like, excuse me?
I love that.
Yeah. So
she wasn't standing for it.
Yeah. So thankfully she kept pushing. And when I kind of was able to rebuild my health, I was literally shocked at how good you can feel when your body works.
Yeah.
And I was so inspired, and that's really led me to start Arta and to create, the nutrition plans and the supplementation and just that help that people need, because there are so many of us who are going through that exact same thing. They aren't sick, but they're certainly not well.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many people who are unwell, and then they spend, 10 to 20 years being unwell until they eventually get sick with something you can diagnose.
Yeah.
But we have so much opportunity to intervene earlier, and that's what I get excited about.
Yeah, it's kind of that in between, isn't it? The prevention. And also at that time, I know for me, when I had my car accident, the doctors were not really there was one I met that was very pushing pro Pilates and that type of thing. But everyone else was very medication, and just mask the issue. So how did you discover that it was the cow protein? Was that a specific person you went to? Just thinking if someone's listening and they maybe are experiencing the same thing, or their kids, what is the route that you went down? What were the questions you asked or the things that you did that actually meant you could go and get that test.
Yeah, so we saw a doctor who was also a naturopath, and they did kind of full blood test. They did everything kind of all over again, and that's who found it. And then I changed what I ate, and that helped immediately. But I wasn't able to fully recover until we also focused on supplementation. And so I think that's also why I'm so passionate about supplementation, is because good quality supplements, when they're used in the right way, can be so supportive.
Yes.
And so I think that's just, it took a long time. I guess it didn't take that long. It probably took about 6 months. So that's not a long time in
the
the
big
scheme of things. Yeah, in being kind of sick for 15 years or 12 years. But kind of in that 6 months, I didn't change anything massively. I just cut out the food that was causing me to be ill, and I focused on other foods and supplementation, and I was literally transformed. I had energy for the first time. My heartburn was gone within 2 weeks.
Wow.
My stomach stopped hurting. I had energy to go to sleepovers and not be the one who was like falling asleep at like 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
It just really changed my whole life. And so I think it can be so powerful.
Definitely. And what's interesting to me is the conversation about getting your supplements and your nutrition from your food versus using supplements to support that. So what do you think was what were you not able to get from your food at that point, and what were the supplements you were adding in, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell. So if I had kept on eating the food that was causing me to be ill, I don't think it would have mattered what supplement I added in. I still would have been unwell, right?
So you first needed to identify the cause.
So look, it's always food first, and I think people are surprised to hear me say that because my business is supplements, but it's so important. Like, I'm a nutritionist, of course. Food is the most important thing that we can do, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do supplements. So I think in the wellness industry, there's so many either or. It's like this or that, but usually it's this and that, right? So for me, I changed how I ate. I took probiotics to help with my gut. I just took a good quality multi. I took a fish oil. So just all the basic things to get my system kind of back
to
on
rebuild.
track. Yeah.
It's so interesting, and I think it must be so daunting for parents if they have this child who they would do anything for, and they feel like helpless that they can't help them, and knowing what routes to go down, and also having the access to that, because it can be so expensive as well. So what would you say is the first port of call? Would it be going to a doctor, getting blood tests and a intolerance test and things like that?
So I think the most important thing is that people aren't thinking it's either or, right?
Yeah.
So if you have something you're concerned about with yourself or with your child, especially, go to the doctor first. Make sure there isn't something underlying that's more serious. Once you rule out that, then that's where it gets complicated, right? Because that's where you're kind of left on your own. So the first thing I would say is, if you think it is more, or you think it could be more nutrition related, keep a food log and go see a nutritionist. Food logs are so boring, and everyone's like, ugh.
I know.
But they're so helpful.
Yeah,
they're so helpful because we just don't realize what we eat. Even me sometimes, if you ask me how much coffee I have a day, I'd probably say 2. It's probably actually 4. If I kept a food diary and was really honest about it, I'd be like, oh gosh. So but
it's also kind of, you have to take the responsibility of playing detective with your own well-being.
Yeah.
Because you know yourself the most. You know your body. You know what's reacting to it. And if you have that diary to go back, you can kind of start to piece things together and notice, okay, when I ate this, I felt amazing. When I ate this, I started to feel tired or sluggish or, so it's a discipline, but it's worth it.
And look, it's not always going to be really obvious, especially if you have no kind of background in nutrition. So I'm not saying you'll make a food log and then all of a sudden you'll be like, oh, aha, it's that, right? Because even with me, if we had made a food log, my diet was good, right? My grandparents were farmers, so we had a lot of farm fresh food. My mom cooked. It's not like we were eating tons of ultra processed food, but there was a food in there that was making me ill, right? So the first thing is, you might see patterns we're not eating any vegetables, we're not eating any fiber, we're actually eating tons of just ultra processed things, right? That's quite obvious, and you can start to make a change there. But then there's the things that are less obvious, like my background, where if it looks all kind of good, then that's probably when you should go see
Yeah.
a nutritionist or someone that you trust to really help you look at what it could be from.
Yeah, and
That's what
also
I
it's a
think.
free tool doing a food log like that.
Yeah.
So then talk me through what happened next. So you were now kind of entering
I was
this
well.
new world. Yeah, but it is
Yeah, no, it's
like
so
that.
inspiring,
Like
yeah.
I've definitely been there, and it's almost like you just have this new
Yeah.
sense of
I was completely obsessed.
yeah,
completely
okay.
obsessed.
So you got very into food, nutrition, but also how amazing that you had this family that were
Yeah.
very involved in wellness and had
Well,
that
my
around
mom
you.
was, my dad was the complete opposite.
Oh,
but,
really?
Yeah, but supportive, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So what were the kind of next steps that took you from that journey?
Well, then I went to university. I obviously studied science and human biology, and then I did my master's in nutrition. Then I became a naturopath, and I became a herbalist because you just get like completely obsessed with all of this,
Yeah.
and you want to learn more and more. I moved here, and I worked in clinical practice.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found really interesting once I was in clinical practice was, when you use really good quality supplements, your outcomes are fantastic. When you use kind of terrible high street ones, then they're not, right? And there was such a difference in quality
Wow.
between the practitioner brands. But those practitioner brands were often behind like a paywall, and you had to go through a practitioner, and they were super
Yes.
expensive, or they were like imported from Australia or from Canada. They had names you can't understand at all, right? Like AD 506. And so like
Yeah.
as a consumer, you're like, what is this? They look very medical.
Yeah.
Like, they feel
scary.
quite heavy.
Yeah. Intimidating.
Yeah, and when it comes down to it, when you're investing in that kind of stuff, how it looks and how it makes you feel is also really important. So then I started to think, oh my God, I would just really love to create my own brand that was more of that like practitioner quality, but it looked chic and it was kind of more in the wellness kind of
Yeah.
space. But then I got sidetracked, as you know, and I
Yes.
went into the fitness world.
I love that.
Yeah. So I was actually
What do you think sidetracked you?
just opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah. So I still loved what I did, but one of my clients, actually, who's now one of my very best friends, and she does our PR. She was doing the PR for Cycle,
Okay.
which is a fitness brand in London.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Look, they want someone in like the wellness world to come and just do some consultation on what they should have at their smoothie bar, and just
Yeah.
very light touch." I love fitness because I used to be a swimmer, so I was like, yes, please.
Amazing.
So I consulted for a couple months, and then they ended up asking me to be on the management team full time. And then within 3 months after launch, I became CEO. So
How
it just-
incredible. You
yeah,
almost fell into it.
or maybe it was
just-
5 months, but yeah, so very, very quickly. So I just kind of followed an opportunity. I think at that time I was probably also a little frustrated with the clinical practice because, again, this is like 14 years ago. So there was still such a resistance to nutrition.
Yeah.
People thought it was a fad. People thought it didn't work. People thought that, what you eat didn't really impact you. Everyone just wanted to do like a juice cleanse
or
and
like
lose
out
weight.
train a bad diet type of
Yeah,
attitude.
and so I found it really frustrating because I was like,
Yeah.
this isn't very fulfilling. All I'm talking about is people kind of being like, oh, I just want to lose this. I'm like, oh, but let's talk about how you feel and
how to feel well. Yeah.
yeah. And so when I got the opportunity to go to Cycle, I jumped at it because fitness is my second love or my first love. Tide.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So yeah, then I was there for about 7 years.
Crazy. But also movement is such a big part of it. And I know you're such a believer in that.
Yeah.
And it is that 360 approach. It's
Yeah.
not just food. It's not just movement. So it's amazing that you've kind of covered so much in your career to then bring you to this. I just want to go back to supplement advice because, as you said, there's such a contrast between the great for you brands and the brands that are going to help you feel better and kind of unlock, whatever's going on with the individual. But there are brands that maybe cause more issues and mask some things or, are not very open about what's inside of them. As a consumer, kind of just looking at the shelves, what would you say are like the key things to avoid or I think it's probably easier to say what would you avoid rather than what would you lean towards. But yeah, if you could touch on that, like just give some advice on that side of things because I think it can be such a minefield.
Yeah, look, it's really confusing, and there's a lot of conflicting advice on whether or not you need them, whether or not they're helpful. I think as a baseline, it's important for you to do the research, and I know that's not as straightforward as me saying just look at this and this, but you really do have to investigate the same way we always do with our skincare. Like we're always online trying to see what it is. Same thing. So make sure the brand kind of talks about their quality, how they source, what their values are when it comes to that. A simple thing to do is when you're in an actual shop is to look at the label and look at kind of the number of actives versus the number of fillers and preservatives and colorings and sucrose. That stuff does not need to be in there. Okay. And I can tell you that as a fact. And I think that if the product is like 8 pounds, it's probably not going to be high quality. Yeah. I cannot get that kind of a cost. There's absolutely no way I could sell this supplement for 8 pounds. Now, I'm not saying you have to spend 60, but I think it's really important to look at kind of how many additives, how many fillers, if there's colorings, if there's added sugar, those are the basic things that you'd be able to see quite easily. And then you really do need to go to the brand website or just get some advice from someone in the shop about what you're actually looking for, right?
It's so important to kind of have your trusted brands as well that you can lean on. And what would you say in terms of, you just said that really look into the labels and, you're not going to get value for 8 pounds. Are there any specific supplements that are created equal? So you can, it is what it is, and it can be charged at 5 pounds or 25 pounds, but actually they're all the same. Are there any, like, for example, creatine or something like that, would you say?
Well, so the creatine one's actually a really interesting example because a lot of the creatine on the market actually has contaminants in it. Okay. So you can see some creatine is like 9 pounds and some is 60 pounds. Yeah. Now, I don't think you necessarily need to pay 60 pounds because there's only so much you can do with a single ingredient, so probably not. But with creatine specifically, I think it's really important that the brand you're going with has done a test on it, right? To show that A, it's pure, B, it's in the right form, and there's no kind of chemicals or contaminants in it. Yeah.
Okay. That's really good advice. And so now you had finished your stint at Cycle. What were kind of the lessons that you took from, 7 years in the fitness industry to then apply that to the nutrition world?
Well, I think one of the things that was really exciting about Cycle and really hard at first is, so when I moved here, I was totally into fitness, again, because I used to swim, but it was just like a big part of my life. And it was a big part of my friendships. And I moved here and I didn't see that here. There wasn't this kind of excitement about movement. It was still quite negative. So people had the mindset, I've eaten badly, I have to punish myself, or like I have to lose weight, or I have to burn off my meal, right? So it still felt very negative. And people thought I was very strange for like wanting to exercise or saying like, let's go to a spin class on a Saturday and then go have food instead of just going to the pub. And one of the things I really wanted to do with Cycle was get people really excited about the transformative power of movement. So I didn't want to talk about weight. I didn't want to talk about 7 inches in 7 days. So we didn't talk about any of that for the first year. And I think it was hard because we wouldn't get the press hooks that other brands would.
Clickbait.
And people would always ask, like, how many calories will you burn and how many inches can you lose? And I didn't want to talk about that. Yeah. And instead, what I wanted to talk about is why it's so great for your mind. It's so great for your confidence. It's so great for every aspect of your life. You will benefit. And I kind of saw the same thing in the nutrition world, right? Nutrition historically has been all about weight and body image, which is completely wrong. So as I was starting to think like, oh, I just really would love to get back into nutrition, because at the same time, people were always asking me, what should I do? I'm training, I feel worse. I still have IBS, I still have anxiety, I still have this. And of course, because as you said, fitness isn't going to fix everything. No. Just like sleep won't fix everything, right? It's a full picture. So what I really wanted to do was try to create that same kind of momentum that we did at Cycle with a nutrition brand, and talk about the transformative power of food and the transformative power of kind of taking care of your nutrition as a fundamental, but not making it so dogmatic, so negative, like really trying to connect it to a positive goal. So
I feel like when you were talking about your story when you were younger, it was also about what you could add in. You were just removing that one thing, and then it was about how can I add in rather than constantly restrict and take away. And I think that for me is a big message that I love to talk about. It's not about restriction, and same with working out. It's not about, punishing yourself or this negativity. It's about, okay, how can we really enjoy wellness? And I always talk about it, but I'm obsessed with blue zones. And I could honestly just do like I could write a book on blue zones, I feel like at this point. But I just love the whole approach to, it is the social aspect. It is feeling good. It's what you're eating, how you're sleeping, and that whole thing. So how do you bring that into Arta? How do you bring your kind of founder personal approach into this supplement brand?
So I think it's kind of interesting what you just said about not wanting to talk about restriction, and I agree, but I'm a bit biased, right? So I come from a background where actually the thing that made me well was cutting something out, right?
Yeah.
So I see kind of restriction as a different way. I think it's actually really important for people, for almost everybody, especially if you're feeling unwell, to have a period. And don't call it restriction, because again, that sounds negative, but have a period of maybe interrogation, right? Where you actually are maybe following an elimination diet or cutting out certain things as an experiment, not as a long-term thing, not as a kind of weight loss yo-yo, but to really see how things impact you. And I think that's very positive. And I think that so many people are still like, everything in moderation and you should have everything. But I don't believe that. And I think actually everything in moderation can be really disempowering because it doesn't take into consideration how you feel. So for someone who feels well, they function well, they're super healthy, they have no issues, fine, right?
Yeah.
But for somebody who's, always exhausted and having problems with their stomach, what is moderation? My husband's idea of moderation is completely different to mine. And yours will be with me. And some people will come from a background where they used to eat tons of ultra processed food and now they only eat, one meal, but it's every single day. That is moderate for them.
Yeah.
But it might not be enough, right? And
Exactly.
so I think it's about having a level of curiosity with what you eat, having, this openness to explore things and then to go from there, because so we have nutrition plans and they're all based on kind of an elimination protocol, right? And the reason we have that is because I went through that, and when I was in clinical practice, I saw so many people who couldn't make a change just from adding one thing in. Now, I don't want to dissuade anyone from adding in healthy habits. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. But if you're feeling unwell and what you've been doing hasn't worked, then that's often kind of a good sign that you need to try something else. Now, from a nutritionist point of view, elimination diets aren't long-term. So I think that's the disconnect between when people think, oh, it's so restrictive, right? Because what you should usually do is you should follow it for a period of time, watch how you feel, and then add things back in. But add them in one at a time.
Yes.
And add them in
slowly. And then again, going back to the log, like really keeping track of what you're adding.
What we often hear is, so our first plan was called the 28-day reset. And what we heard from people was like, I felt incredible, my skin was great, my gut was great, my energy was great. And then if they brought something back in that actually didn't suit them, and it doesn't need to be a bad food, right? It can be any kind of food. It could be eggs, it could be soy.
Cauliflower.
They could feel immediately that change. And that's because they've created a big change.
Do you think that doing something like a 28-day reset plan, do you think that gives almost clarity? And you're more connected to your body. Of course.
That's why we made it. I
completely agree.
Well, also it's the discipline, right? It's already really difficult to change how we eat. It's so ingrained, it's so habitual. So to kind of say, oh, I'll just slowly make a change. For some people, that totally works. And again, I don't want to be saying you shouldn't try that, because you need to try a bunch of things to find out what will work for you. But for a lot of people to go kind of all in and really immerse yourself, because our programs still have incredible food. Like we worked with the chef, the recipes are fantastic.
Oh my gosh, they look delicious.
Yeah, so it shouldn't feel like a restrictive program. It's a bit harder, of course, because you're cutting out some of the things you usually eat. But to go all in for 28 days, firstly, you have a huge sense of accomplishment. Secondly, you usually feel incredible. And then as you get back into kind of your everyday life, you notice more, right?
Yeah.
Because our body is always talking to us. It's always telling us something, whether it's with a headache or we're tired or a craving. And we just lose the connection with that, right? From coffee, from alcohol, from bad food, from,
I think a lot of feeling well is coming back to that connection
it's that
to
baseline.
yourself, which I think in this day and age, like, we're constantly rushing from one thing to another. We're consuming so much information all the time that you almost forget who you are and what feels good for you, because you're being told, like, oats are good, oats are bad, you should eat this, you should eat that. And you're like, oh my God, who am I? Like, what should I do? I don't know what to do anymore. And I think coming back to that connection, really noticing what is going on with you as an individual and knowing how it is so individual. Like you said about you and your husband, what's right for him is not right for you. So can we just go into that? Because I think a lot of people struggle with accountability and discipline and also motivation, but you can have the whole motivation discipline argument.
I was going to say, they're not the same thing. You don't have to be motivated to be disciplined.
No, exactly. Yeah. And I think creating that disciplined life, kind of once it becomes a lifestyle, you don't rely on the motivation.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I'm really interested to know, like, how does that actually work in a busy family home? Like, how does your nutrition fit in with your kids' nutrition, to your husband's nutrition, and you obviously the two of you managing busy lives?
Yeah. Well, so I've actually become more disciplined since becoming a mom, because you almost have to, otherwise it's chaotic, right? Yeah. So I've also changed how I eat quite significantly, because with lack of sleep, everything changes, right? So that, I think that's also a good point. What works for you at one time in your life isn't always going to work for you at another time. And it's really important, like you said, just to continually reassess and not just be hard on yourself, like, oh, I used to do this, and I used to look like this, and okay, fine, but like things have changed. So like, let's update, let's move on. So right now, I don't drink any alcohol. And I think for a lot of people, they use that to discredit me, because they're like, oh, you're way too extreme. But look, I don't do it because my kids don't sleep that much. They're amazing, but they take so much energy. They don't sleep. When I drink on perpetual lack of sleep, like there's no sleep in, there's no Saturdays, like Saturdays 6 a.m. still. I feel unhinged. Like I feel I feel anxious. And so there's also there's of course your physical goals, which are fine, and the vanity goals, which we all have, of course. But there's also, your mental health and, your energy. And now I run a business, and I have 2 kids, and my husband's busy, and we have a crazy life. And if I don't really take care of my health, I just can't cope with it, right? So if I have alcohol, I'm impatient with them. I'm snappy, and then I feel guilt. It's just not worth it now.
So it's just making kind of sacrifices like that, and really looking at, is alcohol actually adding anything to your life versus what it's causing, So
and if my husband and I were on holiday, just us,
of course,
if that ever happens again, then of course I'll have something. But I mean, in my day-to-day life, there are certain things that I now just think aren't worth it. And I think that the point of that is saying, like, you need to decide what's worth it for you. Is the alcohol so enjoyable that the 3 days of feeling exhausted and snappy is fine? Or like, what bothers you more? And look, it's the same with food. If you're someone who is having a really hard time focusing and you're always craving sweets, at some point you'll get to a tipping point where you'll be like, I've had enough of this. Like, I'm just not going to eat added sugar. But you need to make that call, right? It's hard. It's hard to get yourself off of that kind of thing, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, right? So you need to take that accountability of what's best for you, and like where you are.
It's interesting because at the time it's the harder thing.
Oh,
but actually
in the moment it feels impossible, right? Because you're like, all I can think about is sugar. And
and it's just this constant torture going on. But I think that it's really good to know that actually long term it's the easier thing. Like it's harder feeling like shit every day than it is feeling, bouncing out of bed. So what might feel hard now actually is going to create an easier life for yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's where I really appreciate what I went through as a child, because it's made me so passionate about what I do, but it keeps me like intrinsically motivated because I know what it's like to feel bad. So nothing is harder than that. Like me saying no to some ice cream or some alcohol is not harder than feeling terrible. It's just not.
So you have that comparison.
But that's also why I think periods where you commit yourself to kind of those good practices where you focus on your diet, you try to do fitness or stress or sleep, kind of whatever the thing is that you need to work on most, but you really commit. It's not going to be easy, but that's when you're going to feel a big change. And those changes are impactful, because then instead of somebody saying like, oh, you shouldn't have oats because it spikes my blood sugar, you'll be able to tell for yourself, what practices actually make you feel bad, what foods make you feel bad. So if someone says like, oh, you shouldn't have oats, actually I'm fine with oats. They make me feel fine.
I know.
They actually make me feel great because they're healthy. Right?
It's crazy, isn't it? I feel like the internet is like one big oats debate.
It's all about oats. All I'm hearing about is oats and Ozempic and porridge and oats and oats.
Oh my gosh.
So, but I think having the experience of health helps you then make it more of a choice that feels positive. So instead of saying, oh, I can't have that because my nutritionist told me I can't have it, you go to saying, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And that is really empowering, right?
It's
the same with fitness, right? Like when you start to train, it's so hard.
Yeah.
You feel terrible, you feel tired, you feel sore, you feel achy, you can almost feel like you get a flu.
Totally.
And I was like, oh, I felt worse. But it's just because you haven't given it long enough yet, right?
That's the thing.
Your body has to adapt. And then you get to the phase where actually you feel worse not moving than you do moving.
Exactly.
And
and I think the key message in all of this, whether it's food or movement, like we always say, give it 30 days, similar to the 28-day thing. But if you expect to feel good after one day of good eating or one fitness class, then you're not, it just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. But what is the good news is when you commit to something, and you do it for long enough, say 30 days, you really unlock the enjoyment in it, which makes it easier, which makes you more consistent, which gives you the results. So whilst it's going to be a difficult period of time at the beginning, it's then going to just like unlock so much and such a full life.
Yeah. And I think even 30 days isn't long enough. Like, I mean, our program is 28 days because if I said like the 200-day reset, nobody would buy it. The 200-day reset. But what it's
not as catchy.
I know. Sounds a bit aggressive. But what I've seen is after 28 days, you can feel such a change that hopefully that motivates you to continue, right? If we think that doing 30 days of anything, fitness, meditation, yoga, food, and then going back to, habits that we know make us feel out of balance. Yeah. We can't do it seasonally. There isn't like, okay, it's post-holiday, here's my 30 days. And then the pre-holiday, here's my... Yeah. You might feel good for those two sets of times, but what about you aren't going to feel good for the whole year, and you're not going to feel good in 5 years, right?
Totally.
And so I think becoming a mom for me has just cemented that even more because I was a bit older when I had my kids. It's not easy. I'm totally exhausted, but I want to feel great. Like they have so much energy. They're totally exhausting. I need so much energy to be able to have fun with them, and I just want to have fun with them.
So you're fueling yourself to be a best mom, your best mom. Yeah. And tell me how it works with kids, because it must be so difficult when you really realize the impact of nutrition, and then you're like seeing your kids at a kid's birthday party, and there's like sugar everywhere.
I had to do some deep meditations when I first started taking my kids to birthday parties.
Yeah, I can imagine. Really, but how does that, how do you work that out? Where do you even begin trying to make your kids, because I think it is, I've seen it in my niece and nephew. Luckily now my niece seems like she's out of that phase, but she went through such a fussy eating phase, and that's so normal. Hard. And it must be so difficult for parents because you just want them to eat.
Yeah, so I think there are two really important things. One is just getting foundational nutrition into your kids, right?
Yeah.
There is no need, and this might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, but there's no need for any child kind of under the age of 2 to be having any sweets, right?
Yeah.
They have a mango and they're like,
Yeah.
it's like an explosion of senses, right? So like really trying to keep that added sugar out and like a good mix of vegetables, fruits, lentils, beans to expose their palate to as many different foods as possible. We know.
So give them that variety.
Yeah, we know that
quickly.
foundational nutrition can really impact them later in life. And then it's about also like as soon as they start to understand, or even when they don't, just trying to create like a healthy dialogue around food. So my daughter knows that, it's okay to have some sugar, but we have it after we eat, not in the middle of the afternoon, or we don't have it if our tummy already hurts, or if we have too much, it makes us go a bit nuts.
Yeah.
Right. So like it's trying to disconnect the language of this is bad and then this is good to like,
I guess having open conversations about food with them as well.
Yeah.
And
so like she
almost
knows,
like they're adults, like not kind of.
They're way smarter than you think.
Yeah.
And they'll repeat back things that you say.
Totally.
And so they also know that if they're feeling a bit sick, they need like a food that has a lot of vitamin C. So like just trying to talk to them about this food is really great for your hair, and this one will make you really strong at school, and this is good if you feel a bit sick. So trying to, expose them to like a language around nutrition that isn't just about bad and good.
And is very just positive, and
very
also
positive.
the learning behind it.
Yeah.
Because that they do connect to things like.
They're so smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, when the parties happen, because the parties are going to happen, you don't have to worry as much, right? Because their foundational health is good.
Yeah.
They're getting everything they need from their diet. And, I had a hard time because you go to these parties and it's not just cake. It's like cake, candies. It's like a smorgasbord. It's so over the top now. And the kids
It's
are like,
so over the top.
Yeah. So I try to feed them really well beforehand.
Yeah.
I'm like, get full, get full, get
Yeah.
full. But then look, it's your call. I didn't want them to go to parties and feel weird, right?
Yeah,
and feel
of
like
course.
my mommy won't let me have cake. It's a part of life. We have to be able to enjoy parties and enjoy cake, but they also have to know that they're going to have one piece of cake because it's already like the size of their head, not 3.
Yeah.
And then we get home and that was the party, and now we're kind of eating well. So I think it's about like just trying to create that consistency, and it's really hard, but it's worth it. Yeah. The first time we went on a family holiday when she was old enough to kind of understand food, we got to a breakfast buffet and I was like panicked because I was like, oh God. There's like
it's
just the trays of like the glazed
crazy.
Donuts. And so this place had a chocolate fountain and I was like, oh my God,
Oh,
like
shit.
this is going to be a fight every single day.
Yeah.
And so I was like walking by it, pretending I didn't see it. And my daughter obviously saw it, of course. And she was like, Mommy, look, you can't have chocolate for breakfast. And I was like,
she's a mini you.
It's worked. And look, I'm sure it'll change again when she's
amazing.
7. And it's like, so.
She's going to be the CEO of Arta one day.
Soon. No, I just need a break. So I think, and look, of course, it's not always, that wasn't easy to get there. And I'm sure things will change more because, now she's exposed to more things at school. So now she asks for lollipops and for things. So it takes work and it's hard, but you just have to be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
It's our job as a parent to kind of help to protect them and help to keep good habits. And one trick that I always do is if she sees something out that's like really exciting that I just think is like she shouldn't have.
Yeah.
I say, let's try to make that at home. Right? So we go home.
That's a nice thing.
And we make a big thing out of it, right? So we went for breakfast once and the table right beside us, the kids had these donuts.
Yeah.
And they asked to have one and I was like, no. But
absolutely not.
I was like, let's see if we can make it at home. So like we ordered the molds on Amazon and we found like a flavor that we both like. So we made a thing out of it.
And then it's
she
kind of
was
an
really
activity.
Engaged, and she was really patient, and it was an activity. And look, it was still a
That's
donut,
such a
but
good
it was
idea.
baked. It was lower sugar.
Yeah.
I used spelt, not like.
Yeah.
So it was far better than what we would have gotten from just.
That's such a good
like
tip.
this.
I love that.
We still did a chocolate sauce. So I mean, it's still a treat, and it's still her being like, "Oh, this is." But we
more
found a
balanced.
better way to do it because you also don't want to be saying no all the time because they're relentless.
Yeah, it doesn't
The
need
kids
to
are
always be
relentless.
perfect. Just
Yeah.
better, like you say.
Yeah.
And what are some like go-to snacks? Because I feel like kids just are like snack machines. They just constantly want a treat or a snack.
Yeah.
What are some easy like on-the-go snacks that you can just have that are healthy for your kids?
So it was funny when I used to do nutrition talks before I had kids.
Yeah.
Moms would be like, "You don't know."
Yeah.
And it's so true. I didn't know. But my advice is still the same,
Yeah.
which is just fresh fruit, fresh fruit, some good quality cheese, some nuts,
Dates.
like some sliced apple with nut butter on it. Like, I mean, you don't need to buy snack foods that are ultra processed. It's easier sometimes, but is it actually easier than buying an apple?
Yeah.
Not really, right?
And it's cheaper buying an apple.
Yeah. So I think it's important to kind of get out of the mentality that they always have to have like a snack food that's a prepackaged.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I will say that kids love things in packages. They just love it. So it's hard.
Yeah.
But then also make your own. Like I make date balls, which have some flax in it, some chia, some buckwheat, but then also some cacao and dates. So it tastes like a chocolate ball, right?
Yeah.
I make, like oat squares. There's certain things that you can do. And then they love to cook with you so that they can help you. And it feels, really exciting. So
it's a habit stack. Mum habit stack.
It's a habit stack, and it's the same thing. Like it's harder in the moment to do this kind of stuff, but it's way easier long term because there have been a few times where I've given in and I've got them something like in a packet, and the next time they see it, they're screaming, they're having tantrums. They just want more and more and more because this food it's really sweet. You can eat it quickly. It's addictive. And so it's not more painful to just try to make it at home or to have an apple.
Yeah.
It's
Saves
way
you
more
that.
painful to just be like, okay, here, fine.
Yeah.
Because then you're kind of stuck in the cycle, and trying to break those habits, I've found for me is a lot harder than trying to create the healthy habits
From the beginning.
Yeah.
So let's go on to talk about Arta. So what are your most popular products? And tell me kind of a little bit about them. I know that everything is so individual, but are there any of your products, for example, the cellular hydration that I love, that everyone can benefit from?
Yeah, so cellular hydration was actually the first product that I formulated, and because I'm quite obsessed with hydration, and I became obsessed with it when I was an athlete, but more so actually in clinical practice, because what I found was that people are naturally eating quite a low potassium kind of diet, and potassium and our electrolytes are so important for cognition and for stress. And I started to get really interested in it from like a mindset point of view, from like mental energy. So our electrolytes are more like everyday ones. So they aren't for the extreme athlete. They aren't really high in sodium. We're already getting so much of that from the packaged foods. Okay. So it's much more of a lifestyle blend that is really great for energy, for mood, for cognition, for focus. It got me through my pregnancies and breastfeeding. It gets me through when I'm super tired. Like there's just,
it's
in
like
my
a
mind,
pick-me-up.
nothing it cannot do. Yeah. It also has some maca in it, which is just a great adaptogenic herb, especially for women.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those ones. It's unsweetened, so it's a bit tart. It's a bit sour, but again, I like that.
You kind of get used to it, I think.
You get used to it, and then you crave it. And then when you taste things that are super sweet, you're a bit like, blah.
You notice,
Yeah, because everything is so sweet, right? And so I think it just has so many applications that's the one thing I would say out of our whole product suite is just a great choice for anyone. But our other two most popular products are Enhanced NAD Complex, which is like it's the precursor complex to NAD, so great for longevity, and Metabolic Fix, which is for blood sugar.
Okay,
yeah, so
great.
Those are kind of three top ones.
And as a founder, trying to just fit everything in and build a business, I completely can relate, minus kids, and I don't know how, add kids into the mix. I'll probably have daily breakdowns.
Which is normal, which I think all
advice.
The moms are having the daily breakdowns. So
Yes.
I think that, let's normalize that.
Exactly.
That's what happens, and it's okay.
It's totally okay. And everyone, like you say, everyone. And the second you actually share that you've had that.
Every mom is like, oh my God, me too. And then you're like, oh, I feel normal. So good.
Yes.
So nice.
But what would you say have been the biggest challenges with starting Arta? Like almost coming from an angle of supporting other founders that are in that startup phase where, like I always say, there's expensive mistakes and like you learn lessons and stuff, but I wish we could learn them without having to actually make them and pay for them. So are there any?
Sometimes That's the most important part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me, the most important thing, if you want to be a founder of a business, is just having that growth mindset. And like, you just have to be tough. It just takes a long time. It's super hard. It's relentless.
And
as you know.
yeah, it is relentless.
Right.
And it's not enough just to love it,
No.
because it takes every inch of your being. But when you talk about growth mindset, what is that for you?
So you're going to make a ton of calls that are wrong.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't have a growth mindset, it's easy to just get knocked down by those, like by all the no's, by all the errors. Because if you're like, especially when you're trying to raise money, you're going to get a ton of no's. You're going to get 300 no's to get 3 people who say yes, right? So you have to just take that on and learn, right? And so to understand, okay, what can I learn from that? What went really well on that pitch? What was terrible? And how can I adapt it? So it's all about understanding that you just need to keep going. And I think that's what the growth mindset is for me. And it's also about understanding that you're not going to know everything, right? So don't be intimidated.
Especially not at once.
No.
It's a constant learning.
Yeah. And so when you're at the stage to hire, don't just hire people who think like you and think that you're great. And they're like, oh yes, Brian. Yeah. Right? Like try to find people who are going to challenge you, to be really complimentary, who have a skill set that you just don't have. Because I think often as a founder, you think you have to know everything. Like even things like all the finance, you think you need to know everything, but it's impossible. There's nobody who can know everything. So just understanding that and just continually learning from all the errors, because it's going to be a ton of errors and a ton of wrong calls. And it's like, okay.
Also, it's always, I mean, we're at this phase now. I've just hired a COO. And we're kind of in this phase of, we always say this to each other every day, like everything is a test. We're just going to test this, see the result. And it's just a constant test. And it's really interesting because having that mindset really takes the personal side of, the pressure off. But also, it's not personal. This is purely a test to see if it has an effect. And as long as you know it's a test, you're taking those learnings and findings from it each time, and then you're perfecting and tweaking as you go. But I think knowing that having those lessons constantly is just part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think when you're a founder who is like so passionate about what you're doing, and it is personal, right? So you really need to work hard at disconnecting that.
Totally.
And so there's that. And then I think what's also really important for founders is just self-care.
Yes.
It's so important because it's so hard.
Totally. And
it takes it out of you.
What is self-care for you? I loved when just before we started, you were saying like, you're going to ask me about my morning routine, and like my morning routine is chaos, and I'm drinking my coffee first thing, and I'm not having things before, I'm not eating before a coffee. And we were laughing saying, but come on, if that's the worst thing that you do, then like I cannot wait any longer for my matcha in the morning. Like it's essential. And to me, like I know obviously if I eat before my matcha, that's probably the best thing to do, but it's just not going to happen.
You have to pick your battles.
Exactly. So go on, tell me your...
So self-care, look, there's not just one thing, right? And I think that's what's really important. It's the nutrition, it's the fitness. But where I've always been bad is the stress management, right? So because I'm like trained in nutrition, I find that easy. Because I have a background in sport, I find the fitness easy. Like it's easy for me to get up and run, even though I don't feel like it, because I know it's going to make me feel better afterwards. Where I've never been as good at is like that proactive stress management. So that's what I really try to work on now. Whether it's
what are the things that you are testing for yourself now and seeing if they're having an effect?
Yeah. So in an ideal world, I do more yoga and meditation, but like I have a visceral response to meditation. I just I can't do it. So what I do is I do breath work, and I find that way better, way easier. It gets me like super chilled really fast. It helps me sleep. So like that's my go-to now. And when I do that consistently, I notice such a change in my sleep quality, in my stress, in my patience with my kids, in how I feel after a night where I don't sleep, and then there's work challenge and kid challenge, and so that for me is something I'm still working on. I'm still trying to make sure that that's my go-to, because I over-index on fitness because I love it and it's my background.
Feels good.
But you need to make those calls, like actually, is a run going to serve me? Like, are you too tired to go for a run, or should you pull back? And so that's what I'm getting better at.
I also find with breath work, it gives you that almost like for people that struggle with meditation.
Exactly.
The breath is like the centerpiece, a focus. Exactly. I find it really helpful. After this, I'm going to send you the app. And
yes.
There's amazing breath work
Oh,
on there
thank
that
you.
I feel like you'll love.
Yeah.
Okay, just to finish, because I could go on for ages and we're already over time. But can I just ask you a few quick fire rounds? Okay. So if you could only take one supplement the rest of your life, what would that be?
Enhanced NAD complex.
Okay, love that.
For sure.
Oh my God, I'm excited to try that. And one book that's changed your life.
Oh gosh. Well, I just read Let Them by Mel Robbins.
Oh.
Which is, it's just such a great reminder just to get over yourself, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
She's amazing. And I mean, it's pretty obvious, the content, what's in the book, but
There's
it's
nothing
just
new,
so
but
good.
it's
and
just written in
but
a
why
way
do
where
we
you're like,
forget that? Why, yeah, we're like, of course, but then actually that constant reminder every day, bringing it into your life is so good. And one superfood that you would recommend everyone to add?
Avocado.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay. That's good because I love avocado. Tick.
Nailed it.
And one wellness myth that you wish people would stop going on about?
Should we just do oats?
Oats.
Just eat porridge. Eat your oats. Just make sure it's not the packet of sweetened oats. Just eat the jumbo normal oats. Have some oats.
I love
You're
that.
all good.
We're all okay. We're gonna be fine, guys.
You're gonna be better.
We've got this. That's a great way
Enjoy
to
some
finish.
porridge, please, Lord.
Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much. It was so fun.
Thank you.